I was 11 years old when I had my first real encounter with something I couldn't explain. We lived in an old Victorian house on Maple Street, the kind with creaking floorboards and rooms that always felt a few degrees colder than they should. My parents had bought it cheap because it needed work, and my father spent most weekends trying to fix things that seemed determined to stay broken. The house had belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Blackwood before us. She'd lived there alone for nearly 40 years after her husband died. The real estate agent mentioned she'd passed away in the house, but my parents didn't seem bothered by that. Death was natural, they said, nothing to fear. I had the bedroom on the second floor, at the end of a long hallway. My younger sister Emma had the room next to mine, and my parents slept downstairs in what used to be a study. They said they'd move upstairs eventually, once Dad finished renovating the master bedroom on the third floor, but that renovation never seemed to progress. From the first night, I felt uncomfortable in that room. It wasn't anything specific, just a feeling of being watched, the kind of sensation that makes the hairs on your neck stand up for no reason. I told my mother about it, but she said I was just adjusting to a new place. She reminded me that I'd begged for my own room in our old apartment, and now I had one. The windows in my room were tall and narrow, with wavy old glass that distorted the view of the street below. Heavy curtains hung on either side, dark green velvet that smelled faintly of dust and roses. At night, those curtains seemed to move even when the windows were closed. I told myself it was just air currents, the house settling, normal things. For the first few months, nothing happened beyond these vague feelings. I'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. I'd lie there listening, my heart pounding, but the sounds never came again. Once or twice I smelled pipe tobacco, even though no one in my family smoked. My mother said it was probably lingering in the walls from previous occupants. Emma never complained about anything strange. She was only 6 and seemed to love her new room. She'd talk to herself in there for hours, playing with her dolls, singing little songs. When I asked her who she was talking to, she'd just say her imaginary friend. My parents thought it was cute. I felt uneasy about it but couldn't say why. The incident that changed everything happened in late October. I remember because we'd just finished putting up Halloween decorations, and there was a plastic skeleton hanging on our front door. The weather had turned cold, and my father had finally gotten the old furnace working, though it clanked and groaned like something alive. In the basement. That night, I'd gone to bed around 9 o'clock. I'd been reading under the covers with a flashlight, some book about adventures I can't even remember now. Eventually, I turned off the light and settled down to sleep. The house was quiet except for the usual sounds, the furnace rumbling, wind against the windows, the occasional car passing outside. I don't know what woke me. One moment I was asleep, and the next I was wide awake, staring at my ceiling. My digital clock read 12:17 a.m. The house was completely silent. Even the furnace had stopped its noise. That silence felt wrong somehow, too complete, like the whole world was holding its breath. My room was cold, not just chilly, but actually cold, like someone had left a window open in winter. I could see my breath forming small clouds in the air. I pulled my blankets up to my chin, confused because the heat had been working fine when I went to bed. That's when I heard it, footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone walking carefully in the dark. They were coming from the direction of the stairs, heading toward my room. I froze. My first thought was that it was my father, maybe coming to check on me, but these footsteps sounded different, lighter somehow, but also more purposeful. They had an odd rhythm to them, not quite even. Step, pause, like someone was limping or walking with a cane. The footsteps stopped directly outside my door. I stared at the gap at the bottom where light from the hallway nightlight usually showed through. A shadow blocked that light, the silhouette of feet standing just on the other side of the door. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I wanted to call out to ask who was there, but my throat had closed up. I couldn't make a sound. I just lay there, watching that shadow, waiting for the door to open. It didn't open. Instead, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Someone was breathing on the other side of the door. Long, raspy breaths, the kind an old person makes when their lungs don't work quite right. In and out, steady and patient. Then came the doorknob. I watched in horror as it slowly began to turn. The old brass knob rotated clockwise, inch by inch, with a faint squeaking sound. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was paralyzed with fear. The door began to open. Just a crack at first, then wider. The hallway beyond was dark. The nightlight that was always on had somehow gone out. Through that opening came a smell, strong and unmistakable. roses and pipe tobacco and something else, something like old clothes that had been shut away in a closet for too long. I could see a shape in the doorway now, tall and thin, darker than the darkness around it. It stood there, absolutely still, and though I couldn't see a face, I knew it was looking at me. I could feel its gaze like a physical weight. "Hello, child," a voice whispered. It was a woman's voice, old and dry like autumn leaves. I didn't know there was a young one living in my house now. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't a dream. There was something standing in my doorway, something that wasn't alive, and it was talking to me. The shape moved closer. I could see more details now. A long dress, old-fashioned, with a high collar, thin hands that seemed too long, too pale, and a face gradually becoming visible in the dimness. An old woman's face, wrinkled and sunken, with eyes that reflected the faint moonlight from my window like a cat's eyes. "Don't be frightened," she said, though her appearance was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. "This is my home. I died here, you know, in the room upstairs. I've been here ever since." She took another step closer. I could see her more clearly now, and I wish I couldn't have. Her skin had a grayish tint, and her mouth didn't quite move right when she spoke, like the words were coming from somewhere else. "I've been watching you," she continued. "You and your sister. She can see me too, you know. We've had lovely conversations. She's such a sweet child. She reminds me of my daughter." The mention of Emma broke through my paralysis. I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Stay away from my sister." The old woman's face did something that might have been a smile. "Oh, don't worry. I would never hurt her. I just get lonely. It's been so long since there were children in this house. My own daughter grew up and moved away. She never visited. I died alone." There was a sadness in her voice that was almost as frightening as her presence. She moved to the side of my bed, and I pressed myself against the wall, trying to get away. She reached out one of those two long hands, and I felt cold fingers touch my forehead. It was like being touched by ice, a cold that went deeper than skin, all the way into my bones. "You have a fever," she said. "You should be more careful. This house gets very cold at night." I know. I used to lie awake feeling the chill. Toward the end, I was always cold, even in summer. I didn't have a fever. I hadn't been sick. But at her touch, I suddenly felt exhausted, like all the energy was draining out of me. My eyelids were getting heavy. I tried to fight it, tried to stay awake, but it was like being pulled under water. "Sleep now," the old woman whispered. "Sleep and dream. I'll watch over you. I watch over all the children in my house." The last thing I remember before darkness took me was her standing over my bed, that pale face looking down at me, and behind her, the doorway to the hall standing open like a mouth. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my windows and my mother shaking my shoulder. "Wake up, sleepyhead," she was saying. "It's almost noon. Are you feeling okay?" "You're never this hard to wake up." I sat up quickly, looking around my room. Everything was normal. The door was closed. The temperature was fine. There was no old woman, no smell of roses and tobacco. For a moment I thought maybe it had been a dream after all, just an incredibly vivid nightmare. Then I saw the doorknob. There were scratches around it, fresh ones, like someone with long fingernails had been gripping it, and on my nightstand there was something that hadn't been there before, an old photograph in a tarnished silver frame. The photo showed a family from long ago, maybe the 1950s or 60s, a stern-looking man with a pipe, a woman in a high-collared dress, and a young girl between them. I recognized the woman immediately. It was the face I'd seen in the darkness, though younger, alive, not yet touched by whatever had turned her into the thing that visited me. My mother noticed me staring at the photo. "Oh, you found that? I meant to show you. Your father discovered a box of old things in the attic yesterday, photos and documents belonging to Mrs. Blackwood, the previous owner. I thought you might like to have one, since you're living in what used to be her daughter's room." Her daughter's room. I looked around with new eyes, suddenly understanding why this room had always felt wrong. This had been a child's room once, and the child had grown up and left, and the mother had stayed behind, alone and bitter and eventually dead. I asked my mother what happened to Mrs. Blackwood's daughter. She didn't know much, just that there had been some kind of falling out. The daughter had moved away years ago and never came back, not even for the funeral. That day, I told my parents everything that had happened the night before. My father looked concerned and checked my forehead for fever, just like the ghost had done. My mother seemed worried too, but not about ghosts. She suggested that maybe I'd had a vivid dream brought on by stress about the new house and school. But Emma, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Was it the old lady?" she asked. "The one who visits me?" She told me she used to live here. She seemed sad. The color drained from my mother's face. My father put down his coffee cup very carefully. "What old lady, Emma?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Emma described her perfectly. The high-collared dress, the too pale skin, even the smell of roses. She said the old lady came to her room almost every night and watched her sleep. Sometimes she'd sit on the edge of Emma's bed and talk about her daughter, about how much she missed her, about how children should never leave their mothers. We didn't stay in that house much longer. My parents tried to be rational about it, tried to explain it away as shared imagination or some kind of gas leak causing hallucinations, but neither of them could explain the photograph that appeared on my nightstand, or the footprints we found in the dust in the locked attic, or the way Emma would wake up with her toys rearranged in patterns she swore she didn't make. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I woke up at midnight again, and Mrs. Blackwood was standing at the foot of my bed, but this time she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall and stern, smoking a pipe. The man from the photograph, her dead husband. "We've decided," Mrs. Blackwood said, and her voice was different now, harder. "We want our house back. We want our family back. Your sister will stay. She'll be our daughter. The daughter who doesn't leave, who stays forever." I ran from that room screaming. I ran to Emma's room and grabbed her, pulled her out of bed. She was confused and crying, asking what was wrong. Behind us, I could hear footsteps, 2 sets now, coming down the hallway with that same uneven rhythm. My parents heard the commotion and came running. They saw us huddled in the hallway. Emma and me, both of us crying, and they saw what was behind us. I know they saw it because my father went completely white and my mother made a sound I'd never heard her make before, a kind of terrified gasp. We left that night, just grabbed what we could and drove to my grandmother's house across town. We never went back, not even for our belongings. My father paid movers to pack everything up, and even they reported strange occurrences, doors locking by themselves, objects moving, and one of them swore he saw an old woman watching from the third-floor window of a room that was supposed to be empty. The house stood vacant for a long time after we left. It's been years now, and I'm not a child anymore, but sometimes I drive by that old Victorian on Maple Street, and I see lights in the windows even though no one lives there. And once I swear I saw a figure standing in the window of what used to be my room, looking out at the street. Looking for children, maybe, looking for a family that will stay. I never go down that street anymore, and I've made sure Emma doesn't either. Some places aren't meant for the living. Some loneliness is so deep, so desperate that it doesn't end with death. It just waits in the dark in the cold rooms of old houses, hoping for someone to fill the emptiness. Mrs. Blackwood is still there, I know. She is still waiting for her daughter to come home, still watching for children in the rooms where children used to live. The house is her now, and she is the house, and they'll both stand there on Maple Street until they crumble into dust. But they'll never be empty, not really, because she's there, in every shadow and every creaking board, waiting, always waiting. That's my true ghost story, the one I don't usually tell because people think I'm making it up or that I was just a scared kid with an overactive imagination, but I know what I saw, I know what touched my forehead with fingers of ice, I know whose voice whispered in the darkness of my childhood room. And I know that some houses remember. They remember the people who died in them, the loneliness that soaked into their walls, the desperate need to be filled with life again. The house on Maple Street remembers, and so do I every single night I remember.